Hello everyone, this is Ian Schaefer here with UDA Technologies, and we are just about ready to dive into our ConstructionSuite estimating and reporting webinar this afternoon. Of course, today we're going to be building on some of the information that we started covering a few days ago in our ConstructionSuite overview webinar, with a primary focus of setting up some estimate templates for you guys today, working with those estimate templates on existing jobs or new jobs to create good detailed estimates, possibly using things like cost books and the like. And then of course we want to take a little bit of time to take those estimates, turn them into reports or proposals, and maybe even draw up some contracts. So we'll talk about some of the contract editing tools in here as well. So of course, as we're going through the webinar today, we're going to be focused primarily on these things, but as always, if you guys have any questions or there's anything that I cover as we're going through the webinar that you guys have questions about, take a look at that GoToWebinar panel. You should see an area on there marked questions. Chat those through to me as they come up, and I'll try to do my best to answer those as I see them come in. So again, let's open that up so that I don't miss any of them today. There we are. And before we get started, again, we'll just do the brief recap on what we covered a few days ago in the webinar, just to kind of set the stage for what we're going to be working on here today. To begin with, what I have open and what all of you should be able to see right now is the main ConstructionSuite interface. This main ConstructionSuite interface has a number of different quick access tools and good information that it's providing just from the dashboard elements that we're looking at here. Of course, over on the left, we've got the navigation panel, which takes you into each of the primary features like estimating or reporting or schedules, projects, contracts. Over on the right-hand side, these are, again, quick access tools like recent projects or quick links for creating new projects or estimates. There's even a calendar portion down here to take you to today on your company calendar. And then, of course, up top, we have some of the menu items for diving into, again, reports or adjusting your SuiteLink settings or whatever it might be, depending on your different needs or wants and which page you're on in ConstructionSuite. Today, however, we are going to be focused primarily, or starting at least, with the estimating tab over here on the left. We'll also, or the estimating page rather, we'll also go into and work with the contracts and docs portion here as well. And as we work through this, of course, we're going to be doing some customization to templates, and we're going to be adjusting some of the details and the information that's going to be found within these. That information is used over and over again on all the projects that you're working on, and it's used to populate some of the reports and the dashboards like this one, where you've got a cost breakdown for all projects. This information is pulled from the estimates that you're using on each of these jobs. Only the primary estimate on each project, by the way. A project could have multiple estimates, but only one of them is a live estimate at any given point. So the primary estimate is used to populate this cost breakdown. The change orders might show up in that one depending on your version of ConstructionSuite. And you'll see profitability numbers coming in from, once again, the primary estimate, which is also used to integrate with QuickBooks. So you could send over estimates, invoices, purchase orders, whatever it might be, import back actual costs like bills, checks, credit cards, and payroll. You'll also be able to import invoiced amounts and committed costs, and all of that information is summed up to provide a little bit of an overview on the profitability chart down here. Now again, most of this, once again, just to reiterate that point from Tuesday, most of this information is developed from the estimate, and the estimate is kind of the cornerstone for most of the project details that you work on. So when you come and you take a look at the estimating page, you'll see that usually it will take you directly to the dashboard screen, although as you can probably guess, it remembers where you were last. It'll usually take you into the dashboard screen though, where you can get a change order summary and you can see your recent estimates that you've been working on, get that cost breakdown again. Where most of you should start, or what you want to focus on to begin with, is going to be the templates section. Now again, with the templates version, the templates page in ConstructionSuite, or the templates tab on the estimating page, you will find 3 major settings available to you right out of the gate. You'll have the option to create additional templates as well, which will show up in a 4th or 5th section up above. Now if you scroll to the very bottom of this list, this section is going to have a subcontractor estimate template collection down here, where you'll find templates for electrical work, for landscaping, mechanical work, and things like that. If you ever hover over any of these icons, you'll actually see that it gives you a brief little idea on what the template would look like. The landscaping, for example, has a collection of plants that you might be using. If you look over mechanical, this is probably going to give you HVAC details, or in this case, hanging ducts for the air conditioning and heating. Plumbing does a lot of the same thing, plumbing fixtures and such. Each of these templates is typically going to be used as a starting point. So let's get back down there to the list. That would be your starting point for any of the work that you want to do. But of course, just like with anything else, you can edit the template and choose some of the options here to either export it to create mini backups or edit the template itself if you wanted to make some adjustments or changes to them. I've locked most of mine so that we don't have too many people going in and changing them, but most of you would be able to do that. Alternatively, if you want to start from scratch, you could always go with one of the blank files that you'll find in here as well and build your own categories, subcategories, and items. We'll take a look at how to do that in a moment. But again, everybody should have access to these subcontractor templates. Everybody will also have access, regardless of if you're using residential or commercial. You'll also have access to a collection of residential estimate templates, which would include your residential master, your remodeling master, and a residential sample, so you can see how the dollar amounts might come together. Now, obviously, the residential master and remodeling master are of our design. Remodeling master starts with the planning phase, where you would do things like get your building permits and maybe do some design work. It then moves on to demolition or tear out, goes up to foundation, then framing, then exterior windows and doors, and anything that might apply for a general remodeling project. That general remodeling project could include a number of different things. Some of the information that you guys might see in here would apply for just whole home remodels. Maybe you'll see some information in here that might apply on additions or garage conversions or something like that as well. So you'll find that if you do a lot of specialized remodeling projects, like if you do a lot of kitchens and bathrooms, for example, you'll probably want to start with this remodeling master template and clear out anything that you guys don't work with. So if you focus on kitchens and bathrooms and there's a decking section in the remodeling master, you might want to just delete that to get rid of it because it might not apply. On the flip side, you might need to go into and expand a little bit of the information there, but it's a great starting point. And again, we'll take a look at this one in a minute. Residential master is very similar, although I don't think there's as much demolition. There's a little bit more site prep in that one, though. It still starts with planning. Goes on to foundation and framing and exterior windows and doors, things like that. But with the residential master, again, most of this is going to be best used on either spec homes or custom homes. You'll typically find that those are the two that fall into this lot, and you can start with that residential master and build it out for there. Anybody who's working with a commercial version of ConstructionSuite, you'll also get a commercial master, and like commercial master, you'll also notice up here, you'll see the CSI 16 and 50 division templates showing up here as well. Both of these follow the Construction Specification Institute's guidelines, and in 95 they outlined one way to organize your prices, so you'll see that cost coding system available in the 16 division. 2004 they updated it, and that's where the 50 division came from, so if you need one of those as your starting point, again, open those up, take a look at them, and go from there. So again, the easy way to get into these is just to click the little open button. If you want to edit any of the information, like the labels on the documents or change the name of the file, you could do that through the edit menu. You'll also be able to delete templates that you don't need anymore. The star is for setting a template as a favorite. If you come up to the very top of the list, you'll notice that the favorites are always going to show up at the very tip top. And the idea here is you can just basically bookmark one that you're going to be using regularly. That will go up to the top, and that way you don't have to go hunting for it every time. Now, as you can see, there's also a custom estimate templates section. It's a little harder to say than I thought. But with the custom estimates, these are all going to be the ones that you guys are building for your work, and you'll be able to label them and organize them accordingly. So again, immediately under the favorites, you'll typically find all the ones that you've built. This is typically where I find more of the cleanup needs to happen. If you go through and create 5 or 10 or 30 different variations, which I've seen many times, you can always go in there and delete any of the ones that you don't need. Just remember, before you delete anything, export it to give yourself a mini backup. If somebody asks you to go up and clean this list, or you think that this is a good time to go ahead and clean up that list, best to always back up those files in the off chance that they have something important before you go through and delete them. Now again, this is where you'll find most of the estimate templates. We'll be talking about the contracts and reports here in just a little while, so those would be under the contracts and docs section. But for the moment, we're going to start by taking a look at the residential master template, which I have open over on the right-hand screen. So here it is. So the first thing that I'd like to do is give you guys kind of the brief walkthrough on what you're going to be looking at here in the in OnCost. To begin with, the main portion of the screen that you're going to be working off regularly as you estimate is going to be here. comes out to the centerpiece. This is typically where you'll start on the project totals page when you first open up an estimate. And the project totals page, which you can see the tab for down here at the bottom, is all about summary information. On this page, you will see categories, subcategories, but no items. You'll see totals rows, and down at the bottom, you'll also see the company overhead and margin section. All of this information is pulling from each individual category sheet, which you could actually get to by clicking on any of your category headers or subcategory headers here. It takes you directly into the sheet where you can see the subcategories expanded out to provide the detailed line items that you might use for those subcategories. Now, as you navigate through this, there's a number of different ways that you can go through the navigation process. Again, you'll see tabs down on the bottom for each of the category sheets. You'll also notice on the far left-hand side that there are arrows that take you either all the way back to the front, or you can step page by page using the left or right arrows here. Of course, there's also one that takes you to the tail end of the estimate as well. Up above, you'll see similar arrows, but this one's also going to include a little drop-down menu here where you can just navigate directly to a category that you may want to work with, or in my case, we'll navigate back to the project totals page. So I use this one often because it's very beneficial. And then to the right of that, just like in Excel, you've got a little formula bar, which would also include labeling your categories and subcategories. Now, along those lines, again, the default view whenever you're opening up an estimate is going to be something like this. You'll have a series of columns turned on, and you might have the row numbers turned on as well. So you may see something that looks a little bit like this. Now, your typical columns that you're going to be able to see to begin with would include a notes column over here on the left. This is a skinny little column, but if you click into one of the cells on this, it actually opens up a more expanded notes section where you can see general notes and bid notes and field notes. You'll also be able to include attachments here as well. So if you get bid information and you want to attach it directly to the category or subcategory that it might apply to, this is the perfect place to do it. You go to attachments, browse for the file, attach it right here, and then you can preview the files and then move to the next ones as needed. You'll also be able to add notes for each individual file, so you could say who it came from and what you might need to do with it as well. So again, notes fields, these are text fields. They'll apply here. Bid notes, general notes, for me, are one that I always recommend people use as a specification set for whatever it might be that you're looking at. Bid notes would typically be notes for your subcontractors, or maybe order information or part numbers perhaps, or SKU numbers. Field notes would be the notes for the guys that are going to be using these out in the field. So if it's something that's particularly delicate or you need to include any additional details, field notes is perfect. Beyond this though, beyond the notes, you also have a name column. This would be either your category or your subcategory or your line item name. This is a good one. Again, most of these are going to be linked from the project totals page to the individual sheets, but if you click out to the right side of the name in the white space out here, you can actually go into and adjust the name for these items as well. So if you wanted to change design services to design fees, because that's what you might call it in QuickBooks, this is a perfect place to do it. You just click into the right of it. It'll activate the cell so that you can rename the cell. You can also go up here to the top and change the name from here. It performs the exact same function. To the right of this, you have a type column. This is either going to be an estimated amount. It's going to be an allowance that you're giving to your customer. Could be an option, or maybe later you're going to set up change orders as well. The type reflects which one of these applies for this subcategory. The method is your method of calculation. It's either going to be detailed, meaning you have a bunch of line items in there that you're figuring out individually. Could be lump sum. You're just putting in one big dollar amount. You don't care how it breaks down. Could be an assembly. You've got a quantity for the subcategory itself, but it still has line items that it figures out from there. Or you might be working with an inactive subcategory. That typically happens for me when somebody decides that they don't want to do that part of the job. Options could become inactive if the customer isn't even considering it anymore. They just reject it outright. Go ahead and deactivate it and you can move on. To the right of this, you have classification. These are your 5 sets. This is just like that dashboard tool where you've got material, labor, sub-equipment, and other costs. Sometimes on the project totals page, this cell might be blank. That means that the subcategory has a combination of these things. So if you've got a subcategory that has some materials and some labor, the subcategory isn't one classification, so you don't get to see the one classification. You'll find that I, out of habit, break out most of my subcategories so that they each tie into a single classification. Again, this is very, very helpful when you're sending the information over to QuickBooks. Separating out those classifications means that once they get to QuickBooks, you can assign them to an account that makes the most sense for these various different sections. So again, you'll see that. And then, of course, on the right, you've got your summary prices. Now, This is what we're looking at right now as a template, so we'll talk about what's important here. But let's just take a brief tour up top so that we know where to find what we're looking for. Starts with the File menu up here in the top left-hand corner. File menu is where you go to save, print, export, or import for various different file formats. If you're using the Premier or Catalyst version of ConstructionSuite and above, you'll also find your CAD imports here as well. So if you use takeoff tools like PlanSwift or eTakeoff or SoftPlan, you'll be able to import them from here. And most of them have like a materials list that they'll generate, and that's what we're going to be pulling in. Same sort of thing holds true for your takeoff or your design softwares as well, like Chief Architect or Chief Architect. Words today. But as you're working through these things, you'll be able to pull in the materials list from there, and that all happens from the File menu. The Edit menu is all about renaming or moving items around in your estimate. So if you wanted to take a category and move it down a little bit, you could highlight the category and then just use the Move Down function or Move Up. Indenting turns a category into a subcategory. Outdenting turns a subcategory into a category. View menu is all about showing or hiding various different things. This is a great place to go and show hide columns. Again, if you wanted to turn on more columns to work with, you could do so here. Like the description is a good one. That's just a blank space for you to put in some text if you need to expand upon something. So you could go here perhaps. You'll also notice that there are a lot of additional ones in here as well, some of which might be new for you guys if you're first coming into ConstructionSuite 8 after you've been using one of the older products. Some of those new ones might include things like rooms or phase. This is a way for you to organize your costs, which is especially beneficial if your customer wants a breakdown by room, or you're working on a large commercial project and you wanted to get a cost breakdown by phase. Super useful columns. These are just regular data entry columns though, so you can go ahead and open those up and use them. You'll also find some things in here like estimated amounts, sales tax, total costs, total prices, QuickBooks integration columns like committed costs and things like that. You'll also notice that on the project totals page, some of them are grayed out like tax type or unit cost. These only apply on the category sheets. You can't turn them on here because they don't apply on your summary sheet. They only apply on the category sheet where you would actually be putting in unit costs and quantities. So these ones might be turned off or unavailable on this sheet. When you go to a category sheet, they'll become available, but other ones might not be available, like the percent of total. So again, just keep that in mind. If it looks like it's turned off, that's probably because you're on the wrong kind of sheet for that column. But again, viewing is all about showing and hiding things. You'll see that there is an option on here to, where did I put it? Toggle row and column headers. This doesn't turn off the column name itself, but you'll notice that it gets rid of the identifiers. Like the left-hand side had numbers down the side. Up top there were letters. This is in case you wanted to build any of the Excel style formulas or do cell references or anything like that. It's a great way for you to see which one's which. I don't need those at the moment, so we'll turn them off. But you'll also see that there's an option here to hide everything that you didn't use. This is a super helpful tool. When you're going through the estimate, you want everything to be there and available, but you don't want necessarily to have to sift through it every time you do a small project. So after you price out the small project, hide everything that you didn't use and you'll be good to go. Next up, Insert menu. This is exactly what you might think. I need a category. Come to the Insert menu. Click where you want it, insert category, there you go. Same for subcategories or items. From the Tools menu, you'll be able to go through and again do things like syncing with schedules or creating new schedules, adjust the options for the estimate like defaults for new subcategories that you create. The Estimating menu itself will include things like sales taxes and classification markups. These typically apply a little bit more once you get into the estimate for a project. On a template, you're probably going to skip these. There's also some change order features in here in the middle of this page, once again, for live projects, also available first in Premier or Catalyst and above. Reports, only going to be available when you're working on an estimate for an actual project. Doesn't always have to be the primary estimate, but it doesn't apply here for templates. We'll dive into those in a minute. QuickBooks integration is the same. We'll hold off on that one for a moment. Now, beyond this, you've got estimate template information here. You've got summary information over on the right, and this is exactly what you might think. I need to see a summary by category total or something like that. And then there's a little cost breakdown down here as well. And that's most of what you might need to see for on-cost. Now, as you're going through and you're working with your templates, again, kind of pulling us back into where we started with this, estimate templates are designed to help you focus on what needs to be included on any given job. Now, with that being said, when you're building an estimate template, it should not be built with a specific project in mind. It should be built based on things that you might use on any given project. And along those lines, you don't want to be too terribly specific when you're setting up things like categories and subcategories, because then you'll end up hamstringing yourself or you'll have to re-enter names and things like that later. Now again, this is one of the reasons why you'll see when you're working through the estimates in ConstructionSuite that most of them follow a general outline for a project. Typically, you start by planning the project. Let's turn off that phone. Typically, you would start by planning a project. This is where you're going to be setting up your design fees or your permits and your lot costs. You'll then move on to foundation and framing and exterior windows and doors. You'll notice that the order of your categories matches the tabs down at the bottom. But again, you set up these categories to be a little bit broad. You're not going to be doing exterior bay windows. That might be one job that you do, but in this case, you just call it exterior windows. Within that category, you'll see the subcategories: windows, exterior doors, overhead doors and installation, stuff like this. Again, nothing too terribly specific. The specifics might come later with line items or descriptions or something like that. Now, as you're working through this, again, if you need to change any of the information available, you can always go into and right-click on one of your subcategories. Again, this was a big thing that we were doing heavily on Tuesday. We're going to continue the same theme on Thursday. If you need to do something with a category or a subcategory, right-click on it. You will find the most important tools here. But if you needed to adjust something like a category name, you could rename one of your categories here. You could also delete categories that don't apply if you never do foundation work. Maybe you just get rid of that one so you don't have to skip over it every time. You might also come here if you wanted to maybe expand upon site work. You can either right-click on your category name, or if you hover in the white space above your category, there's an option to add a new category here. So we might actually expand this one out and call this site work. And within the site work category, we might decide that we need some new subcategories. Again, same principle as before. We can either click in the space here or right-click on the new subcategory title to change this over to maybe excavation. And then from here, again, think white space, so we can click into the white space here to add a new subcategory. And that new subcategory might be hauling, where we put in things like dumpsters and we put in whatever else might be included here. And we could do another section here, maybe we call it backfill or something like that. But again, as you see, you can kind of just go through and insert some of the additional subcategories that might apply. And if you guys are doing a lot of on the site work, if you guys wanted to include this, now might be a good time to put in utilities for utility installation, which might be very, very important as you guys are working through building like subdivisions or something like that. Utilities might be included. You might do an entire site as one project, and then each lot on the sites might be their individual ones where you want to put in things like power lines and water mains and things like that, or connect to these things. Either way, this might work to build out some of their categories and your subcategories. And again, as you're working within this kind of framework, your focus should always be on doing the repetitive tasks in the template. So at this point, if you did want to include your specifications for each of these sections because you have standard specs, go ahead and click into the space for the notes, go to your general notes field, and just type in your specs here. They can always be adjusted or changed a little bit as you're working your way through the estimate for live projects, adding things like paint colors or specifics for maybe trim size or flooring options that were chosen or something like that. But for the most part, I find that putting your specs in here just saves you a lot of typing. You'll also find that now is the perfect time to go into and start taking a look at sections like your allowances. We'll go into appliances because this entire subcategory would be an allowance in my mind. So if we take a look at appliances, we might switch the appliances over to an allowance. Just click into the type column and you can make that adjustment now. You'll also be able to go into this section and start entering in the spaces that might be subcontractor work where you plan on doing just bids, lump sum values for those. So you might go in and take a look at the electrical section and set that one to a lump sum, which could be done by just clicking into the detail section and choosing lump sum from your dropdown. Other sections might have combinations of things, like we've got appliance labor here, we've got installation labor as a labor. I don't have appliance labor materials, but there could be equipment, so maybe we come into this and change this to equipment. And then change the classification type for this to equipment. Other, don't really need this for appliance labor, so let's right click and delete that section. And that just kind of cleans out your list. Now again, a primary focus for this shouldn't be to necessarily try to apply costs for everything. You're just setting up the framework, so just focus on that as you work your way through. Again, you can make these kind of adjustments to just about any section of the ConstructionSuite estimate as you're working on your template. As you finish up things like category names and subcategory names and line items, classifications, and maybe tax types and things like this. Tax type is another column that you can open up. Just let's go back up to the View menu, go to Show Hide Columns, and you could check the box for your tax type here as well. If you guys have taxes that might apply, you could go ahead and turn on that tax type column. Keep in mind that if you're working in the United States, setting a classification of material does not automatically set a material tax type. If you set something like labor as your classification, it's not automatically going to apply a service tax to it either. If you want the tax to apply based on the tax type, you have to set a tax type. Now, I find that for most of our Canadian users and Australian users, pretty much everybody else outside of the United States, you'll typically have just a couple of tax codes instead. In Canada, it might be something like GST or PST or HST or some combination of them. If these things apply, and you needed to go ahead and plug those in, apply those tax types wherever they might be included as well, and you'll be good to go. Now again, this is all about setting up your template. Try to get all the drop-downs set that you would typically use. Try to get all of your categories and your subcategories in there. If you can put in the items that you would typically use, now's the time. You'll see that I have some placeholders here as well for other items that I might not have thought of yet that might show up on later jobs, and put in notes where you can as well so that these save you a little bit of time. You'll notice that the quantities right now, though, are all blank. Blank later will assume a quantity of 1. And that's in case you just needed to put in like a big lump sum for a bid. You don't have to type in one bid at $10,000. You just put in $10,000 and you're good. If you wanted to zero out, then you could go through and zero out those quantities, but we're going to be saving this as a template. And if you go to the File menu and choose Save As Template, you'll have an option to go through and actually delete or zero out quantities, unit costs, and some additional things like that. So this is going to be my new residential template. We could call it in this template. And there you go. Now again, templates are all about setup. Estimating on the job is about using that setup and trying to make it as data or as data entry light as possible. So when you're starting to work on an estimate within a project itself, let's pull one of those over. This is the Deaton residence that we set up on Tuesday as well. So as you're working your way through this one, you'll generally want to start from the project totals page. This is going to be your first section, and just go section by section. You're going to start in design services. From here, my design services is going to be a lump sum. So you'll see I've switched this to a lump sum. Let's hide or collapse down those items. And again, one bid, $5,000. Move on to the next section. As you're working your way through this, you'll notice that most of the keyboard shortcuts work, or the keyboard-friendly tools will work. Obviously, as you're doing your data entry, tabbing through your sheets goes right, Shift-Tab goes left, Enter goes down, Shift-Enter goes up. So if you don't want to use the mouse and click around a whole lot, that's great. Just tab and enter your way through the data entry, and you're good to go. This means, of course, as you're doing your data entry, if we're just going to go through and re-enter some of the same information, you can just do so relatively quickly, just typing and entering as you guys update your details. And then this one we might just need to delete outright. And then we go on to lot costs. This is a new home. This is one of the subdivisions that we've built out, so you can go through and update some of the values as we go. Now again, this is all about setting up the estimate information. As you guys are working your way through the estimates themselves, there are additional details in here that you're going to be setting up as well. For example, in this estimate, I said that I received a bid for design services. Maybe there's an architectural firm that we're going to be working with. Tell the estimate who that is. If you accept a bid, make sure that you go up to the Tools menu, it's the View menu, turn on some of these additional columns, go to Show Hide Columns, and make sure that you're looking at some of the columns like the description column. Maybe turn on the bid status column and insert the resource column here as well. The idea with some of these additional columns is that the details or the content that you're getting by working with some of these columns will provide you a lot of valuable insight. As you're working your way through this one, it also saves you a ton of time as you're pushing the information over to QuickBooks or pushing it into a schedule or generating reports. So again, some of the additional columns that I've just turned on would include, for design services, there's a description. Maybe this includes 3 sets of prints. So we'll just put that in and expand that description column a little bit so that we can read it a little easier. Then it is an estimated cost, a lump sum. Classification is other because it's design services. We could always change this to maybe subcontractor if you wanted to. Continue working through. This is going to be firm. It's in contract now. We have neighbors and associates, and they're going to be doing the work for us. As we continue to work across from this, we might move into some of the next sections here, like, again, quantities and costs are still going to be the same. And, I just navigated over to a different sheet. Let me pull that guy back. There we are. So we've got quantities, costs. These guys are going to be the same. As you continue moving out, you'll see some of the additional details that I was talking about earlier. Quantity, unit cost, the unit itself. This could be a bid, perhaps. Don't see it here, but this is a unit that I want to use, so let's go ahead and pull in bid. Resource in this case would be the person providing this. So my resource in this case is going to be, who do we say? Neighbors and associates. There we are. Now the estimate knows where it's coming from. And because the estimate knows where it's coming from, we can run a report that says, here's our contract with neighbors and associates. We can also do some additional work with, let's say, pushing this information over to QuickBooks. Quick, easy, detailed, but possible because you're telling the estimate everything that's going on. You'll notice that I also have an inline markup column here, and it shows me the dollar representation for that markup. Then it gives me a total price for my customer. The total price is going to be the contract amount for this individual line. The line item markups are going to come from either manually putting in a percentage in the column itself, here, manually putting in a dollar amount for that section, or if you go to the advanced screen when you click on this, there are classification markups that you can apply as well. So you'll remember that there was that classification drop-down menu we were taking a look at a moment ago. This is the perfect place to go in and apply some of those markups that you need to use on each job. Those markups might include things like, maybe we have a 10% material markup to cover things like waste or theft or something like that. I had 63% across the board, but I can't remember why now. But our labor markup might be 63% to cover the cost of insurance for our employees and holiday or vacation time or sick days. Uniforms would probably be in there. Company cell phones might be in there. Subcontractor markup might be a little less. We just want to apply a small markup for a management fee, perhaps. Equipment markup, we have to keep it insured and maintained, so we'll put a 20% on all that. And then other costs, I'll just build that into the cost of the item so we don't have to have an additional line item markup. So this is going to go through and it's going to adjust the price for most of the items. But as you're working your way through this, there's also going to be a company overhead margin sheet at the end. And the company overhead margin is for global markups. This takes everything into account as you're working your way through the company overhead margin, and there's going to be two primary calculation options for the company overhead margin. So again, typically what you'll find is in ConstructionSuite you've got a unit cost and a quantity. Quantity times cost gives you estimate. That's kind of like an extended cost, or if you never had to pay tax or markups or anything, it would be that. That estimate amount has a sales tax that could be applied. When the sales tax is applied, that gives you a total cost, how much it should cost you out of pocket if you go to the store and buy it. From that, you can apply the inline markup, the line item markup. That gives you a total price. That's how much your customer should be paying you, or that's what they should expect. That will give you to the overall, that will bring you to the overall cost of the job. That overall cost of the job is then going to have some additional things applied to it because, as a company, you want to make a profit. This is where you put that profit. You also have overhead expenses for everything that happens in the main office. Every company's always had overhead. This is where you put in that overhead percentage. You could also have a contingency that applies. You might have some other global markups that you want to include here as well. This is where you put those. There are two types of markups that you are going to be using if you're setting a percent markup, and that's either going to be a margin or a percent of costs. Now your percent of costs is the markup itself. If you've got let's zero these out and see how much the job is going to cost, because we'll just use that as our baseline. So there we are. So we're looking at a $594,000 job. It's almost $600,000. On a $600,000 job, if we're using percent of costs and we say that there's going to be a 20% of cost for our overhead, this 20% would go into the percent fixed amount column, or the percent column here. And as you're working your way into this, 20% of... Oh, sorry, it hadn't finished getting rid of all the other stuff. So it's a $440,000 estimate. With a 20% of cost, that $44,000 gets $88,000 added to it. When you add that $88,000, you come up with a new project total of $530,000. That's pretty straightforward. Now let's say something changes. Instead of doing percent of costs, you wanted to figure out what your gross margin would be. In that case, if you change over to a percent margin, it's still going to use that $440,000 number. But in this case, the calculation is happening in a very different way. Instead of saying $440,000 times 20% gets you $88,000, add that to the $440,000 and you had that new amount of $530,000, this one now says I need to keep adding to the contract amount until 20% of that contract is going to my company overhead. And so you'll see that now we have a contract amount of $550,000. 20% of 550 is 110. So percent margin, which by the way is an industry standard for fixed fee contracts, but percent margin in this case will always get you a higher number because it does kind of compound upon itself. In this case, it calculates using itself and all other percent margins here as well. So if we also applied a 10% profit margin, now 30% of the contract amount is going to the company overhead margin. The remaining 70% is job cost. And you'll be able to see those kind of things here. So then the question comes up of how we're going to apply this for our customers. Sometimes customers don't like to see these kind of numbers where we're charging them $189,000 for our company overhead margin. And that's fair. I understand where they're coming from, but that doesn't mean it's any cheaper for you guys to do business. So we need to take these numbers and maybe fold them into the cost of some of the rest of the content for the job. An easy way to do that is using the reports. Now again, before you dive into the reports themselves, always make sure that you save your estimate. And don't forget, as you're working your way through this, it's very important to make sure that your numbers are getting in there and that you always make sure that the project is going to be set up properly so that the estimate is being saved into the correct job. Now as you save your estimates themselves, let's get back to the project totals page because we're going to be doing a little bit of comparison here, and I'm going to simplify this view. There's some predefined views down here in the bottom right hand corner, which you guys might have a hard time seeing, but you'll notice that there's a little slide bar down here in the bottom right, and there's 4 little buttons down here. The one on the far left is going to be this simplified view. I like the simplified view because that gives me a little bit more that we can work with. You'll also notice that if you adjust the slide bar, it's going to make the text much, much larger, and you can actually see what I'm typing. Now, as we're working through this, I mentioned earlier that the Reports tab is going to come up as we're working on the projects themselves. In the Reports tab, you will find effectively 4 sections for your reports and 2 wizards. There's a button here to go back to the ConstructionSuite software, but you could always see the little icon down here at the bottom. It looks like the 6 little, or the honeycomb little looking icon, the silver honeycomb. That's us, that's ConstructionSuite, so you could either click this or you can click the icon down on your toolbar at the bottom. The report wizard gives you a list of all 4 drop-downs, but it's in one wizard. So you could just click on that if you needed to generate all the reports. Proposal wizard is focused primarily on the proposals. So almost got tunnel vision for you here. Each of the drop-downs will include reports that are typically going to be used for a specific role as associated with the job. So your project management reports might be your project management team or your supervisors. From this drop-down, you will see things like labor reports and classification reports, which could be used to generate a materials list. You might get an item units report so that you can pull out all of the items that are going to be priced out per square foot or something like that. You'll be able to go through here and take all of this information from your pricing detail and plug it into various different reports to send out to your team. List Notes report is a great one for generating as a spec sheet. Under vendor reports, these are focused on people like neighbors and associates who will be providing us with our plans for this project. So from there, you will need things like subcontractor reports, which could be used or inserted with the subcontractor contract. You might be able to use this one as well for items like purchase orders or materials lists, so that you have a list of things that you have to go to the store to buy if you're making a stop off at the hardware store or the lumber store. Customer reports would include things like change orders or a project totals report for a summary, an allowance report so that they know how much money they have to spend on various different sections, or an options report to see what they need to choose. You'll also have some financials. Most of this is going to be tied in through QuickBooks integration. So as you import your actual costs, you could do an estimate versus actuals to figure out how close your estimated costs were. This does do total cost versus actual cost, not total price, because we are not factoring in your markup for your clients into your projected costs here. But again, you have all these different reports, and when you're looking at the reports themselves and you go to generate one of these reports, you'll actually notice on the report there's always going to be a series of options available for you to choose. Some of these might be filters, some of these might be display settings or display information. You'll see several different fields and details like that. But as you go through and you work your way through the report forms, where did I put that form? Here it is. The form itself is also going to include this handy little link down in the bottom left-hand corner for most of the forms to edit the template for the report. So this classification report, it's a detailed report. And the idea with the classification report is you might want to generate a report that gives you all equipment usage for the job. So you might choose equipment, and then you could choose which columns that you want to pull from the estimate. Obviously, in this case, I need quantity. That's going to be how many maybe man hours on the piece of equipment we need, but we don't need sales tax or markups or estimated costs. I might do the cost in here because I want my guys to know the cost per hour that they're looking at so that maybe they don't go over too much. Especially if it's something like $100 to $150 an hour, and they, waste an extra 2 hours on that piece of machinery, that might cost us $300, and that's a lot of cups of coffee. So I want to keep them focused on this, and I want them to pay attention. Now, I don't want my company overhead margin. That might not apply here. So again, we want to make sure that we're not adding too much into the cost. Otherwise, they might see too much detail. But maybe I do want to include some of the additional detail here, like line item notes. You click OK, and this will actually extract all of the applicable information out of the estimate, put it into OnPoint, which is a very handy little report generating tool. Functions a lot like Microsoft Word. So in this case, when you're looking at it, you can actually come into this section and start adjusting some of the details and modifying the content for it here as well. This one was quite simple. There's just a tiny little bit of rental equipment that's going into this report. But again, as you're working your way through it, it just kind of pulls out the applicable information and it drops it into the template you're working with. Now again, this template, very simple, kind of bare bones, in fact. And so what you may want to do as you're working your way through this is you may want to go into and adjust each of these templates. Now the easy way to adjust the templates would be to once again come into the estimate, go to the reports drop down where you can find that or find the report that you might be trying to generate, and just click the estimate or the edit template link on that report, and it'll actually pull open the template that ConstructionSuite is going to every time. Now this makes it extremely easy for you to go into the template itself and add in all the boilerplate information that you guys would typically include. So that boilerplate information might, for a classification report, you might put in some notes on the job, for example, or you might want to adjust what information is going to show up. You're attempting to edit a master template, any changes? Yeah, we want to do that. So as you're working through it, again, you might want to do something like insert an image for a letterhead. That's actually going to be up here in the insert menu, add letterhead. Or you might have some boilerplate information that you've got in a Word document that you want to insert. So if you go to the File menu and you take a look under the Import section, you'll find that there are options to import text files and Word documents. There's even an option to import a PDF and turn it back into a working Word document here as well. Of course, can't be locked, can't have permissions or anything like that, but the option certainly exists. You'll even be able to take these templates and export them to forms like export to a PDF or export to a Word document. Maybe not as applicable here when you're working with the reports, but extremely useful when you need to take a contract and send it to your legal team, let them review it, change the information, and then send it back to you, where you can then import it right back in again, and you are back to having a full functional working document. Now again, other things on the file menu, you've got all the standard functions: save, print, export, so on. Insert menu is all about inserting things like images and headers and footers and date times and things like that. You'll see bookmarks in here as well. Bookmarks is a very important one for the reports, by the way. I'm going to pause here for a second because ConstructionSuite looks for bookmarks to figure out where you want us to put pieces of information. This is a report that has a table, and we need to know where to put that table. So if you come to the bookmark section and you show bookmark markers, you will see all of our little bookmarks for what we need in order to insert this information. If you actually use the go-to option, this tells you what they're called as well. And this becomes important because you'll notice that the first one here is notes. If you want your notes to come at the bottom of the classification report, then just go ahead and grab this entire section, cut it, or use Control X, come down to the end of the report, Control V or Victor to paste, and you'll be able to move the notes down to the bottom. You can do the same thing for your classification table here as well. Classification type shows up here. We chose equipment and it said equipment. That's where that goes. The class is the table, and the line item notes would be the notes that we included, but maybe after the table. So again, this just gives you an idea of what it is. You can even click on one of these and click OK to take you to that bookmark if you aren't sure which one's which. So again, easy ways to be able to go through and find these and move them around. If you delete a bookmark, you won't be able to insert that piece of information. You'll actually have to reset the template to get your bookmarks back. So don't delete these. Move them around, sure, but try to leave them in there someplace just to make sure that you don't lose them. Now again, other information that you can insert here, of course, hyperlinks, backgrounds, page breaks, things like that. If you need a table, go to the table section. You can insert and modify tables. If you go to page layout, this is where you can do things like shift your page orientation. If you want it to be landscape instead of portrait, that's the perfect place. You can adjust your margins. You can insert a watermark. You can even change some of the blue text to black. I use blue text as my indicator for what I need to either verify has updated or update the additional information myself. So that's the perfect place to do it. View, again, change the layout, change the look. Tools menu is going to be all about setting up like letterheads and things like that. But the tools menu is also special. You will find that in most of our reports, we have what we refer to as autodoc fields. Fields of information that pull from your ConstructionSuite database in order to fill in the blank. Here, in this classification report, I have autodoc fields for the company full address, for the company's license number, for the company phone number, for the project full address, and the development number, and the lot number. If I don't do development or lot-based projects, these become irrelevant, so we can always just come in here and right-click on these sections and delete them. You'll also notice that if you right-click on a field by itself, you can delete just that field and replace it. So if you ever need to do that, this is the perfect place to kind of go through that process. And as you're making some of these adjustments, just keep in mind that removing the fields is fine. Adding new fields is very easy. You just put the cursor where you want the field to show up, and then from the drop-down menus up here into the Tools menu, you can pick which field you want to insert. Some of them are going to be customer or vendor fields. Some of them will be project-specific fields, and some of them will be company fields, your information. So if you think your information might change, like you guys are going to be moving in 6 months, so you want to put in a field for your phone number instead of just putting the phone number in by hand, this is the perfect place to put it. Now again, these are all the custom fields for the reports. Don't forget, you can also just click in here and type in some boilerplate information or some standard text. If you need to reach our office, call company field. Where did we put the phone number? Business. It's probably under additional, company phone. And that's it. So that's how you might add in some of the additional information for it. And then don't forget, at that point, you want to save it. And now that's part of the standard template as well. So you've got that information to work off of as well. This can be done for any of the existing templates in ConstructionSuite, any of the report templates that you're going to be working with, both in estimating and scheduling. You'll also find that there's a number of templates outside of these as well. So if you're using the commercial versions of ConstructionSuite and you wanted to modify the standard RFI template or the transmittal or submittal templates, you will find similar links available there where you're creating your RFIs, submittals, and transmittals. Now that's most of the detail for the reports. The proposals, these are very important documents because this is where you start to dive into the specifics. Now I will say that the proposal wizard has a lot of options. There are many options in here, both for choosing what type of template that you want to provide and choosing how you want to distribute that information to your customer. So plenty of information in here for you guys to work with. As you're working your way through the proposal template, though, you'll notice that it remembers your settings. So the last time you use the proposal wizard, it will include the set of settings that you used on that for that report, and that will be your starting point for your next proposal. So you'll see that information coming through here as well. And in this case, we're doing a residential estimate, so it's going to have a residential template. We'll verify the details for the job here. In this case, this is where you choose one of the 6 residential templates to build off of. This is my UDA template, so this is the one that I'll use. You'll notice that each of these also has their own individual edit template links with labels that you can apply to this template so that anybody following you through the wizard will be able to edit the right template. So edit the templates here if you need to. On the next page, it will pull the scope of work and special conditions from the project. If you need to add additional information, you can type it in here. On the next screen, you'll be able to adjust some of the base price information and supporting detail for this proposal. Next screen is going to be your dimension set if you included any for the job, and this would be things like total square footage for the house or total covered area maybe, number of floors or bedrooms, bathrooms, whatever it might be. And then on the next screen, this is where you can get into the real meat of the proposal itself. So this is where you can insert a project totals report into the proposal. And inserting that project totals is going to be a matter of taking the estimate information, all of this detail that you've put together, and plugging it into the proposal in a way that not only makes sense for your customers, but also paints the picture that you want them to see. And one of the things that we do to make that possible is we give you the ability, first of all, to use the categories and the subcategories. That's our typical default, although you can check the box here for items if you want all 3 levels of detail. You might have noticed that I had categories only checked by default here, so if I don't want them to see the subcategories, I just want them to see planning with a total cost, and then foundation with a total, and so on, go with categories only. Now for the purposes of this estimate, we're not going to use that. We will, however, include the company overhead and margin, but once again, I don't want my customer to see that we're charging $189,000. It is a very fair rate for the project in our area, but it's still not a fun conversation, so we're just going to prorate that into the cost of the categories and subcategories so that it gets built into the contract price for each section. Makes it a little easier to discuss, and it's kind of like sugar-coating the medicine there a little bit. But in this case, you'll be able to include that value, and it just does the math for you. You'll also have options there to include those notes. If you put in those specifications like I would normally recommend, this is the perfect way to get the general notes in there, but bid and field notes might not apply, so you could turn those off. You'll also be able to do some other things in here as well, like hiding individual section costs. Now, hiding the section costs would be things like, I choose to include my categories and subcategories, but I don't want them to see how much we're charging for design services. Hiding those costs means that they don't see these individual costs, but they do know that we're doing planning, and planning consists of these 4 headings, and then has a total cost of X amount of money. This number, of course, is going to be a little bit higher because we're prorating into the categories. You'll also notice that there's an option to prorate into allowances. This is a discretionary thing. If you choose to prorate into allowances, it's going to take that $189,000 and spread it evenly over everything, including allowances. If you don't outline your allowances separately for your customer, they might think that they have more to spend. In this case, a little over 30% more. So keep that in mind, that if you choose to prorate into allowances, that's fine. Just outline those allowance dollar amounts that they should be spending elsewhere. I don't do that. I like to just prorate it into everything else, but I think in this case we don't have that much in allowances anyway. But I do like to hide those total costs and read through some of the additional options if you'd like, and then click Finish when you're done. Now, as you step through and you read the additional information that's coming into this proposal, keep in mind that we are taking the information and the detail from the estimate itself, and we are adjusting how this information and detail is going to be provided to the customer. As such, this report could contain a lot of information, and you will probably want to go through and kind of touch it up a little bit, just verify the details on the proposal as you generate it. But ultimately, once it's finished, it will look something like this. There's some additional information or some additional touch-ups, again, that I like to do as we're going through. One of those would be inserting the letterhead. We'll always want to make sure that we have some branding on the page. Always make sure that things like the client's name is spelled correctly, and if I don't have any piece of information from one of these fields, we just go ahead and get rid of the field. This is in a table, so I'm going to delete the extra row on the table. And so on through. Again, just cleaning up the information to make sure that it looks the way I want it to look and gives the client the right idea on what we've got included on this job. Again, very professional looking document, very easy to work with, should be easy enough to read as well. You'll notice that some of the areas in here might have to have some spelling. Shingles, should be shingles. Row lock is correct. So sometimes you'll just need to go through and do a little bit of touching up before you send it out. Once it's done though, just like before, you go to the File menu, you can print it, hand them a paper copy if you like. You could go to the Page Layout tab and email it as an attachment. I think that's under Tools as well. Yeah, email as attachment. You could save it and bring them to your office and show it to them on the computer. You could export it as a PDF or a Word document and send it off as an email attachment as well. Or under the File menu, you can also upload it to ConstructionOnline. You'll see the same option exists for your estimate as well. And if you choose to upload them to ConstructionOnline, then you can share them through a customer portal if you guys have a ConstructionOnline account set up. Oh, also, the link between ConstructionSuite and ConstructionOnline is a tool called SuiteLink. It'll actually help you go through and upload and modify some of your content there as well. So that might be an easy way for you guys to get the proposal set up. And again, just as a quick reminder, if you guys are going through and you're working with those report templates, you'll find most of those available in the Contracts and Docs section under Report Templates. This folder exists only for administrators in the ConstructionSuite software, but it's also accessible through the links on each of the report forms as you're generating those forms. So again, if you don't want to go through here and try to figure out which template goes with which report, skip that, go to the report form, click the Add a Template link, you get everything that you need, and then just click Save when you're done. In addition to these templates, you also have all of the contract and report templates. Now, the fun part about this is with ConstructionSuite, the light and standard versions of ConstructionSuite come with at least 140 templates. I think it's 141 different contract and document templates. As you move up through the versions, Pro and Contractor and above include over 175 templates. I think we're up to like 178 or something. You get over 200 once you move up to the corporate and developer versions of ConstructionSuite, which would include things like developer tools and personnel management tools, which might include job descriptions maybe, or employee agreements, confidentiality or non-disclosure agreements. All that's part of this package as well. And as you step into a lot of this additional information as well, all of these templates are customizable. We always just recommend that you create your own copy. So if you wanted to go in and take a look at, I was working with somebody earlier actually who's joined us today on some of their fixed cost contracts, fixed amount contract. If you double click to open up the contract, it'll give you our copy and it'll ask you which job it applies to and what the customer name is for this job. And then it'll go through and fill in all the blanks. In my case, I'm going to skip that because what we want to look at instead would be going through and just touching up some of the details for the contract. So when this shows up, we'll cancel out of the document management wizard because I don't need to assign a customer a job yet. And then for the rest of this, it's just a matter of clicking in and adjusting the contract information. So here we have a scope of work. The owner agrees to purchase and the contractor agrees to construct the above mentioned structure and fixtures. Thereto in... This is just blue text. It doesn't actually fill itself in, so I want to delete this. And maybe instead of doing it that way, we can change the text back to black, but we could put in AutoDoc fields instead. So project fields, this is the project thing. So this might be in city of state, maybe. And this is all bolded maybe. So just click on that, go back up to the File menu, and Home menu rather, and bold, and so on. So you can go into and adjust some of this text. Again, the auto doc fields are immensely valuable because those are the blanks. And rather than writing into the blank, like typing into it every single time, put an auto doc field there and let the system do that work for you. You've already typed in the name once. There's no sense to type it in 1,000 times. So you've got things like this. Again, you've got the ability to cut, copy, and paste. So if you have an Article 1 here, let's say Article 4, you wanted to move Article 4 and 5 maybe. You could just highlight these sections. Control X will cut those sections, and you can see that the articles auto-update. And then maybe if we want to put it in here, we can Control V as in Victor. Articles still auto-update. And then you just adjust the spacing and everything like that. If you have additional information that you need to insert, same thing as before, just copy it from outside of the document that you're in, paste it in here, and if you ever need to add anything in, usually what I recommend, especially for the articles themselves, just come to the end of the previous, enter to get to the next one, and if you're starting a new article, you can also, same thing as before, tabbing and shift tabbing just kind of navigates you through the article sections that you're working on. And they're all bold, and the type is supposed to be 12. And that just matches it up. So. Oh, sorry, these are all supposed to be capitalized. What am I doing? I say that as if this was actually going to be committed to anything. It doesn't matter. But as you're working through it, those are some of the easy ways to just kind of maintain format, consistent contract options and things like that. Also, as you're working through, just like with programs like Word and everything like that, if you need to adjust any of the spacing, you can right-click and go to the paragraph to adjust your spacing. Hanging indents are going to be things that you can work with in here. You can set up page breaks or document breaks. You can also adjust things like multi-level numbering. Click into this and you can adjust how you want all the numbering and everything like that to work. Ultimately, this should function just like every other Word document system you've ever worked with, so it should be very, very intuitive. It should almost be second nature. It may take time, but it should be quick and easy. And on the contract import options, from the File menu again, you can import here. Import PDFs as full contracts, Word documents into these sections, and if you do want to insert something, just click on the one that you want to insert, browse for the file, and you can either put it in as a new document, which could then be saved as a template, or add it to an existing document, like this one. And as always, don't forget, as you're working through templates or estimates or whatever it might be, save these files often. Save them early as well to create that initial set. Save early, save often, and that way you won't ever have to worry about spending hours working on a file that got lost because your computer decided to do Windows updates, perhaps. So save early, save often, and that way you won't have any heartache or heartbreak because of computers doing computer things. So let's see, what else? At this point, I think we've covered most of what we have for you for our estimating and reporting webinar. As always, if you guys do have additional questions, send them my way. Go ahead and use that chat function or the questions function in the GoToWebinar interface to send me any additional questions that you guys might have. Also, in case you didn't catch this in the beginning, or in case I didn't say it, we are recording this week's webinars, so they will be produced and uploaded to our YouTube channel. Go to YouTube and search for UDA Technologies, and you will find our channel consisting of a little over 100 videos now, I believe. And you will find this webinar up there over the course of the next few days. For all of you who have attended or signed up, you'll also be getting a recording sent to you via email, probably a link, and that information should be available for you shortly as well. For anybody else, though, or for anything else that you might need, you can always go back to the main ConstructionSuite interface, go up to the Help menu, and take a look under Contact Information for a variety of phone numbers and email addresses to reach out to us at any time. For those of you who are comfortable with what we've covered today, though, I want to thank you again for joining me. Once again, my name is Ian Schaefer. I'm one of the Senior Product Specialists here at UDA Technologies. Guys, it's been a pleasure having you today, and hopefully we'll have a chance to talk again soon. But until then, you have a great afternoon, and take care.